Colin and his companions were cornered in the jail cell. They thought they had escaped Venestra's evil clutches, but they were wrong. As Venestra's evil rat warriors inched closer and closer, our heroes wondered if they would ever escape. We must stand and fight, and use the weapons that I've cast out of iron. I'll use my mystic blast to stop them in their tracks. As Venestra's minions and his rat warriors encircled closer and closer, would they escape Venestra's evil clutches, or will they be consumed to their death? Find out in Mice and Mystics. Hello there, I'm Danny, and this is one of my very favourite all-time fantasy board games. It's called Mice and Mystics. It's by Jerry Hawthorne and published by Plaid Games. Today I'm going to do a quick review of the pros and cons of the game, and a few little tips for those people who might want to go out and buy Mice and Mystics and add this to their board game collection. Mice and Mystics is a cooperative adventure game for 1 to 4 players. It's for ages 7 and up, and each time you play a chapter, it takes around roughly 90 minutes to 2 hours. The game is set in a fantasy-based world where there is a king who lost his wife many years ago. The king's name is King Andon. Until one day, Venestra, a woman comes into his life from a place called the Darklands, and to cure the king's loneliness, the king falls under her spell and he decides to marry her. Now one day the king falls sick, and that's when Venestra's evil intentions come out to play, and the subjects of King Andon realize that Venestra has much greater and bolder plans for the kingdom that they're in, and they make a hasty getaway. So this game is very story rich, it's very story centered, and it is amazing. So I'm going to quickly start off by going over the rules, showing you some of the characters without giving you too many secrets away, and then give you a few little evaluative tips about what I thought of the game, and maybe you can take this into consideration when you're thinking about purchasing or ordering this game. So here we go. Mice and Mystics is played through these characters using these beautiful illustrated character cards. So how you read the card is, you've got these beautiful icons here which are very simple to read. You've got the class, in which this character Colin is both a leader and a warrior. This sword signifies the melee value. The shield signifies the defense. The feather or the fur signifies the law. And the foot signifies how much more additional movement this mouse can make on a turn. Then you've got these hearts. These heart symbols represent its life amount, and then you've got some text and some starting equipment, which I'll introduce to you in a moment. You've got Tilda, the healer. She's got some very interesting abilities that help support the other characters, especially during combat. You've got Maganos, one of my favourite characters, is a mystic. It's the title, Mice and Mystics. You've got Filch, the thief or the scamp. And then you've got Nez, the tinkerer or the warrior. He's like the little blacksmith who makes all the weaponry for the other characters in the game. They all have their own beautifully, richly written backstory, which I love. It just adds another aspect to the game, which, or nice touch to the game, which just really gives it that flavour. and that flavor text really brings that story of desperateness that these mice go through to life. Now, as I said before, each of these characters comes with some equipment that enhance their melee attack or their range attack or their defense. So for Colin, he's got his sword and he's got his leather breastplate, which adds to the values that are written here on the card. They also begin with some abilities that you can choose from, which allow the characters to gain some sort of advantage throughout the game. Just note here that you've got a cheese number here, and that denotes how much cheese one would need to pay in order to use that ability on their turn. So cheese is like the currency. Now, throughout the game, you can search and find more equipment, and you can also purchase more abilities for a cost of 6 cheese. And those abilities stay with you throughout the game, especially if you're playing in campaign mode. There's a clear progression throughout the game where your characters travel throughout the story and they develop over time, which is excellent and very thematic. What also comes with the game are these beautifully illustrated tiles, which serve as the landscape for the adventures that the mice go through. I'm not going to show you all of the tiles, but here are some of the tiles that you might see. They've got some clear iconography here about where to place the minions, and you've got icons here that when you take the action, it flips the tile over so you can go to another area below where that tile is in the castle, which is excellent. So it's got a lot of layering and a lot of depth. This tile here is one of the dining hall, and you can see that the artwork here is incredibly rich. There are some incredible things that happen in this particular room, which I'm not going to tell you about, but you can see that the spaces are clearly defined with red lines, yellow lines, and in these spaces here, there are some rules that the minions and the miniatures have to follow when they move from space to space. For example, a minion won't be able to move, or a hero won't be able to move diagonally. The base of the actual figurine has to bridge 2 spaces only. You place the figurines onto the board. It just really shows not only the scale, but the immersion that the players have when they engage in the storytelling. So this is one of my favorite aspects of the game. More tiles, the better. And the tiles fit together in certain combinations that allow you to explore. White doorways represent the tunnels underneath the rooms in the castle. So you wouldn't be able to go from a yellow doorway into through a white doorway. The doorways would have to be the same and matching in order for a mouse to cross through. What also comes with the set is this beautifully illustrated rulebook. I'll talk about the rulebook in a little bit more detail later on. There are some things I like about it, some things I'm not so keen on. I'll tell you why a little bit later on. This is the Sorrow Remembrance book. This contains the rich story that you'll be playing across the 11 chapters. It has tile-specific rules for each scenario. The book is very clearly illustrated, very, very well written. Although, a little disclaimer is that some of the rules in this book are probably not as clear as I would like them to be. Now, this is the clock board, and the clock board serves as a way of tracking certain events and encounters and order of turn play throughout the game. So on one side you've got the page numbers, which denotes where the story will begin and how many pages you have until it ends. You've got the cheese wheel here. This is the cheese wheel, which determines when you get a surge or when minions add cheese to the wheel. If you add 6 cheese to the wheel, then you get a surge and the minions then attack your fellow heroes. In this section here, you have the encounter cards, which tells you what encounters the mice will go through, depending on what page they're up to in the game. Then you've got space for the party stash items, where you'll place them here, items that are shared amongst all the mice. and then you've got your search cards here, and your ability cards can go here as well. On the right hand side, you've got these numbers here, and this denotes the initiative order, the order in which characters take their turn to move, to attack, to search throughout the game. And you also place the minion initiative cards on here, which also determines their order in the game. When it comes to combating, combat is done through using dice, which I have here. So in order to attack, what you do is, first of all, you determine whether it's a melee attack or whether it's a ranged attack. And because Colin is a warrior, he can only perform melee or close range attacks. So if the minion is on the same space as Colin, or whether he's one space away, Colin can attack this minion on his turn. So to determine how many die to roll, what you need to look at is his melee value plus any equipment that he might have. So that's 3 dice. And you take the 3 dice, you roll the 3 dice, and you can see that he's got 2 swords, so it becomes 2 attack. And not only that, he gets 1 cheese that will go in his stash. And as I said before, the cheese is the currency in the game that allows the character to use their special abilities or to purchase other abilities as well. If the attack is rolled successfully, the other player to the left or to the right rolls the defense for the minion. So to work out what defense the minion has, you need to look at the initiative card for that minion. So for example, if the Rat Warrior miniature matches with this particular card, Elite Rat Warrior, it has a defense of 2, so the person to the left or the right would roll the die, and if you got the shields, then the Rat Warrior would block one of the attacks that the hero would have rolled. If it gets anything else, it takes the damage. And as you can see, I rolled 2 cheeses, which is really unlucky because that means 2 cheeses gets added to the minion wheel. And remember, if 6 cheese get added to the minion wheel, or the cheese wheel, sorry, then there is a really big surge of new characters that come to the tile, and you can't go to another tile until you clear all the minions on a particular tile. The minion attacks the hero. You need to look at the shields that the hero has and roll defense die in order to defend against that minion. However, I should note that you don't need to roll defense die unless the minion actually rolls a successful attack. If the minion doesn't roll any attack swords or ranged weapons, depending on what sort of minion it is, then you don't need to roll for defense. Now, some characters like Maganos have weapons that give them a range attack. Now, if you're using ranged attack, you need to check on the board to make sure that there is a clear line of sight. But also, if you have other minions in between or other structures in between, that can block your line of sight, which can prevent a ranged attacks. Now, when performing ranged attacks, you're looking to roll these bow and arrows, which signify a successful ranged attack. Now, if the minion rolls a shield, then it blocks that ranged attack. These 2 pieces of equipment can't be equipped on Maganos at the same time. And the reason being, if you look clearly at the iconography, this one requires 2 hands, this one requires 1. So if you were to equip Maganos' staff, you wouldn't be able to equip the Scorching Wand because it requires his right hand, which is already being used up by the staff. However, in saying that, when playing the game, you can have this card in your backpack and interchange the 2 cards when you want to use their special abilities written in these text boxes. Another action that a mouse can take on a tile is to search. And when a mouse searches, you roll the die, and if you get one of these stars, it means the mouse has searched successfully. Now, each mouse can only search successfully once per tile. Now, each time you enter a room, you will flip over one of these encounter cards, and then you'll look at the page that you're currently on in the chapter and match it to the page number on the encounter card and place those minions onto that tile. Now, when you're placing minions, usually place creatures with range attacks furthest away from your heroes, creatures that are large with big melee attacks closest to your heroes, and all other creatures you'll spread evenly on the minion entry spaces. Now, if there are 6 cheese on this cheese wheel during your time inside a room, then a surge happens. That means an extra creature or creatures come onto that tile that the mice have to deal with, and that's going to raise the tension and the pressure. Now, the only time you wouldn't use the encounter card is if in the scenario book it tells you that there is a special setup for creatures and minions, and there's a special surge. So in that case, you wouldn't use this card. You would look at the description in the actual scenario book. One more thing I need to draw your attention to is this here. Some of the cards say mouse traps, some of the cards say ambushes, and some of the cards say normal. So whenever you see mouse traps, if you're in a room where there are X's in the room, you need to place a mouse trap. And you'll need to consult the book to work out how those mouse traps work. If it says ambush, you'll need to roll a die and move the minion's corresponding initiative card up the number of initiative spaces based on the number that you rolled, which means that when you're starting a room for the first time, that might mean that that minion takes precedence in terms of turn order, which can be a little bit scary. I should also mention that surges only happen once per room. So once a surge has already happened, if the minion cheese wheel fills up again, it doesn't trigger another surge. What you do is move the page number up 1 space, but no new minions are added to the board. If you go back to a tile that you've already previously explored, you don't have to use the encounter card or add new minions. Now, in terms of the story and the theme, what I really love about the game is how much it reminds me of the Secret of Nimh books and the Redwall books and the new Mouse Guard comics that are out. It just oozes with that flavor and that theme that makes the gameplay so rich and puts it into a context that is both enjoyable but engaging, especially if you love the mice fantasy subgenre. I find that this world is quite appealing to families and children, and that this would probably suit if an adult who was quite familiar with the rules were to play it with their son or daughter, or with a group of children, because you kind of need that adult there to kind of get through a lot of the complex rules. In terms of the mechanics, there's quite a few mechanics going on in this game. The combat itself is quite simple. So that means, I guess a good thing for that is that children coming into this game would find it easy to pick up quite quickly. However, I guess the cons for the combat system that are in this game is that it's very luck-based. You're rolling dice most of the time. You have little control over what gets rolled. But in saying that, there's a lot of fun in you know, trying to roll cheese, or trying to roll a sword, or trying to roll a shield against a minion who's got 4 or 5 dice for defense or attack. So that aspect of it really raises the tension level. What I really love about this game is the ticker timer mechanisms that are going on. You've got the page timers, which really push your characters along so you don't get stuck or dwell in one room for too long. And you've got the minion cheese wheel, so you're constantly on the edge of your seat. You're constantly going, no, minions, please don't roll that cheese. Because as soon as that cheese wheel gets filled up, a surge happens, and then your characters are in incredible danger. I do like the initiative track. I do find that the game skews towards favouring the minions, which adds to that sense of peril and that sense of impending doom, and I think it makes the game that much more exciting. If you're trying to search, or if you're trying to engage in some sort of challenge that the characters encounter in the game, you might find that in your group you'll have a constant stream of really lucky rolls where you are constantly succeeding, and in some games you might be rolling the dice and finding that you're constantly rolling the the things that you don't want, or your rolls are very unsuccessful. So there needs to be some sort of mechanism in the game that balances the dice rolling with some of the choices and the unpredictability of the game. So I think that's an area where I guess the game could have been tweaked or improved. So I guess with your group you could introduce a variant that allows you to modify some of the dice rolls based on maybe your lore or your character's abilities. What's really good about the mechanics is that it really follows that nice RPG character leveling up style of gameplay, and that kind of allows the people playing the game to feel some ownership and some progression of their character throughout the game, which I really adore. Now when it comes to the rules, the rule book is not the best rule book ever. It has a lot of ambiguities in terms of when and where the rule applies in a particular scenario or game. The rules, there's lots of them, and especially in that very first scenario, you're bombarded with every situation under the sun, and you're constantly referring to the rulebook to find out what exactly you have to do. The first couple of times I played this game with my gaming group, we realized that the first 2 times we played, we lost because we were playing the rules incorrectly. And finding particular rules for particular rooms, and understanding what they actually meant and how they worked was quite difficult. There was a lot of Googling, which really interrupted the flow of the game. So you'd be in a tile, and all of a sudden there'd be a question that come out about combat or what surge would happen, and then the whole game would stop, and one of the members of our group would have to look up the rule, and then the game would resume. So I found that the rules, if they were a little bit clearer and tweaked a little bit more, they would make the game and each chapter flow a little bit more. And it really is quite apparent in chapter 2. There's one rule that could have been clearly inserted that would have made that chapter flow a little bit more, especially when playing it for the first time, because we played chapter 2 for the first time and halfway through the chapter realized that we'd been missing one of the rules for the whole scenario, and so we had to go back and play it again. On the other hand, what I really like about the rules is that, especially in the Sorrow and Remembrance book, each tile has special rules that go with it. Now, the rules that are specific for each tile add flavour to the game. The rules that are specified in this book make sense. So it might be getting someone's attention, or it might be battling off some rats or some roaches, and something happens to the cheese wheel. So even though the rules could be a little bit clearer, the rules that are actually in here really add a thematic element to the game, which I do like. In terms of replayability, Mice and Mystics is a consumable game. So it means that once you've completed all 11 chapters in the Sorrow and Remembrance book, there's really not much point in going back and playing the chapters unless you're playing with a new group, or if you're introducing it to someone for the first time. The 11 chapters are quite challenging. There's lots of replayability in each chapter, and if you're someone who wants to go back and reread a really good novel again, then it's fine to go back and play some of the chapters again, because some of them are really exciting and the chapters are very different from each other. So that's quite a good aspect of the game. Now, in terms of educational value, Mice and Mystics provides you with a rich storytelling experience. It's not a competitive game in the words where people are competing against each other, so it builds a lot of cooperation, especially if you're playing with younger children, especially siblings who might not get along very well with each other. This game can help bring them together because you have to cooperate with each other to achieve certain goals. It helps with storytelling or developing imagination, creativity in younger children. In terms of the adaptability, in terms of what's suitable for the appropriate number of players that can play Mice and Mystics, I would probably say it's best with 2 players, but you could have 3 or 4 players playing this and still have a lot of fun. With 2 players, you control 2 mice each for most of the scenarios, and that kind of reduces the amount of downtime you have between each player's turn, and also it really gives you a lot more to do, especially for each player, so it kind of immerses each person a little bit more in the gaming experience. If you're looking for a 2-player game, this is definitely it. I wouldn't play it as a solo game, mainly because there's not anyone for you to talk about in terms of the decisions that you're going to make in the game, but definitely 2 or more players. Now, if you're looking at the cost of the game, the base game would be about in the medium to high price range, but you get a lot for it. There's a lot of components inside, which you don't need to purchase any extra stuff for. However, in saying that, if you really like the base game of Mice and Mystics, there are several expansions out there, and as you can see, I really love this game. We've got the Mice and Mystics Heart of Glorm, which has an extra 6 chapters in it, which gives you another storyline to play at, and some new heroes and minion figures to play with. And you've also got Downward Tales, a big box expansion. So the mice head out into the forest, and there's a whole new storyline with a whole new book inside there for you to explore. And if you really, really love the world of Mice and Mystics, there's a brand new game that just came out this year. It's called Tail Feathers. It is excellent. It's kind of like X-Wing, but with blue jays and mice, and you can actually use some of the mice characters in Mice and Mystics in Tail Feathers, and it is amazing. I can't wait to paint the figurines in it, and it also comes with a book of scenarios. However, you don't need these other Mice and Mystics games to play Tail Feathers. Tail Feathers is a standalone box game. With my final verdict, this is hands down one of my favourite board games ever. In fact, it's currently at #1. Dead of Winter was my #1, but this is definitely my #1 at the moment. Following this video, I'll put a table up to show you what I rated each aspect of it. Hope you enjoyed the review. Bye!